In my 65 years, I thought I knew everything about life and people. I, Basil Trenton, had spent 40 years tinkering with pans and pots in the best restaurants in New Albany, and I could tell with my eyes closed when a steak was cooked to perfection just by the smell of it. I could tell the origin of a spice by barely touching it with my tongue. I also learned to recognize people, their moods, their desires, their personalities. But with my own son, that skill failed me. My kitchen in the Maple Street house had always been my pride. Spacious, with marble countertops, a collection of knives from around the world, and copper pots that I waxed to a shine every Sunday. Even after retiring 3 years ago, I continued to cook. For myself, for occasional guests, for former coworkers who stopped by to discuss new trends in cooking. Without Eleanor, my wife, the house emptied, but the kitchen remained alive. Eleanor passed away 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and relentless. We lived together for 37 years. She was always my chief taster, my toughest critic, and my most devoted fan. Eleanor believed in me even when I was just a cook in a small cafe, dreaming of bigger things. Her support helped me work my way up to chef at the Silver Vine, the restaurant that earned the city's first Michelin star when I was there. After she died, Eugene came twice, for the funeral and a month later to check up on me. He was 37 then, though he looked about 45 because of his perpetually furrowed brow and premature gray hair. My son, whom Eleanor and I loved so much, was always dissatisfied. Life, work, us. You could move to a smaller house, he said, looking around the kitchen with undisguised disdain. Oh, why do you need all this now? I remember gripping tightly my favorite Japanese knife, the one I used to chop vegetables for dinner. This is my home, Eugene. This is where your mom and I lived most of our lives. Sentimentality is an unacceptable luxury these days, he sighed, as if explaining the obvious to a child. You could get good money for this house. The neighborhood is appreciating. I knew what he meant. After Eleanor died, I was left with a nice pension and savings. Our house, bought 30 years ago, was now worth 5 times as much. And Eugene, my only heir, was already calculating what he would get when I died. Our relationship had never been easy. Maybe I worked too much when he was a kid, came home late, tired, the smell of the kitchen embedded in his skin. Eleanor said he was jealous of my work, of my passion for cooking. Maybe she was right. When Eugene was a teenager, I tried to get him involved in cooking. Took him to the restaurant kitchen on weekends, taught him the basics. He would defiantly crinkle his nose at the smells, roll his eyes at my explanations about the importance of proper temperature or the finer points of ingredient selection. It's a dirty job, Dad, he once declared. You serve people. All your life you've been on the dole. I want more than that. That conversation happened when he was 16. After that, he never came into my kitchen again. Instead, he went to school, went to law school, married Odelia, a cold as a showroom girl from a good family, and opened his own law firm specializing in property law. Our meetings became infrequent and strained. At the family dinners Eleanor hosted, Eugene barely touched my food, preferring salad and mineral water. Odelia followed suit, often inquiring about the caloric content of each ingredient. I stopped trying to impress them and started cooking the simplest meals when they came over, so as not to hear another comment about excesses. After Eleanor's death, our relationship grew even colder. Calls once a month, dry holiday greetings, formal questions about health. I knew Eugene was ashamed of me. His father, a chef without a college degree, his hands scarred from knives and burns. He never invited me to meetings with his clients or friends, never asked me to cook for their parties. My culinary prowess, of which I was so proud, was something shameful to him, a sign of social inadequacy. When the pain in my chest first pierced me on an early April morning, I first thought it was just ordinary indigestion, perhaps from the experimental sauce I'd tried the day before. I took a pill and continued making breakfast. But when the pain intensified, spreading to my left arm, and my breathing became labored, I knew it was serious. I had enough mental clarity to dial 911 before sinking to the kitchen floor, leaning against the refrigerator. The hospital greeted me with cold light and the smell of disinfection. The diagnosis sounded like a verdict: severe myocardial infarction requiring emergency bypass surgery. I vaguely remember calling Eugene before the surgery. The nurse dialed the number, handed me the receiver. His voice sounded strained, but he promised to come immediately. The surgery lasted 6 hours. When I woke up in the ICU, the first person I saw was Eugene, sitting next to the bed, phone in hand, but his presence was already a surprise. "How are you feeling?" he asked, putting the phone away. "Honey, like a truck ran over me," I wheezed. His face remained serious, but I noticed something new in his gaze. Anxiety, fear, concern. It was strange and unfamiliar. Over the next few days, Eugene came every morning, always neatly dressed in his expensive suits, and spent an hour at my bedside. He talked about his work, about the new house he and Odelia were planning to buy, about politics in the news. Never once did he ask about my plans or feelings. Odelia came over only once, with a bouquet of lilies, which she placed on the nightstand without removing the cellophane. "The doctor says you'll need care after you're discharged," Eugene said on the 5th day. "Don't worry, we'll make the arrangements." I didn't know what we meant. Were they going to hire a caregiver, or was Eugene offering to stay with them? "I can manage on my own," I answered, though I wasn't sure myself. "The doctor said I just needed to take my medication regularly and avoid overexertion." "Don't be silly," Eugene frowned. "You just had major surgery. You need help." There was an unfamiliar concern in his voice, and I felt something warm stirring in my chest. Maybe my illness had made him reconsider our relationship. Maybe the fear of losing his father had awakened the feelings he had suppressed for so long. The day before I was discharged, Eugene brought me some papers. "They were medical papers and a power of attorney," he explained, "in case you get sick again, so I can make quick decisions about your treatment." I didn't read it. My eyes were watering from the bright light, and I had left my glasses at home. I trusted my son and signed where he indicated. "I'll take you home tomorrow," Eugene said, putting the papers in his briefcase. "Be ready at 10 in the morning." It was the first genuine smile he'd given me in years. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, not from pain this time, but from hope. Maybe things weren't so bad between us. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild what had been destroyed by years of misunderstanding. I barely slept that night, imagining how I'd rebuild at home, how maybe Eugene would stop by more often, how I would, when I got stronger, make him the meals he loved as a child. Pancakes with blueberry syrup, homemade chicken noodle soup, apple cinnamon pie. I imagined us sitting around the table and talking, really talking, for perhaps the first time in decades. In the morning, the nurse helped me dress and gather the few belongings I had. I sat on the edge of the bed, ready to be discharged, and waited. 10 in the morning, 10:30, 11. Eugene's phone was unavailable. At noon, I asked the nurse to try calling him again. No luck. "Maybe he's stuck in traffic," she suggested, but there was doubt in her voice. By 2 p.m., I realized my son wasn't coming. The hospital couldn't keep me longer. Another patient needed the room. The nurse offered to call a social worker, but I refused. I was ashamed to admit that my own son had forgotten to pick me up from the hospital. "I can call a cab," I said. "It's all right." But deep down, I knew that nothing was okay, and it never would be. The hospital hallway seemed unfriendly and alien. I sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, clutching a bag of medication and discharge papers in my hand. Every few minutes I checked my phone, even though I knew it wouldn't ring. I'd tried to call Eugene 8 times already, all to no avail. "Mr. Trenton, are you sure you don't want us to contact social services?" A nurse named Wanda, who had been taking care of me for the past few days, looked on with concern. "They could arrange transportation." I shook my head. Pride was a long-standing vice of mine. Eleanor had always said so. Pride wouldn't let me admit that my son had abandoned me, forgotten me like a worthless thing. "I'll call a cab," I repeated, straightening my back despite the tugging pain in my chest. Wanda sighed but didn't insist. She helped me call a cab through the app and stayed by my side until we saw the car arrive. "Don't forget to take your medication on time," she reminded me as I slowly stood up. "And don't overexert yourself. Call an ambulance at the slightest discomfort in your chest." I nodded, grateful for her concern, and slowly made my way toward the exit. Each step was hard, not from the physical pain, though there was some, but from the weight of realizing my loneliness. 65 years old, heart surgery behind me, and no one cared enough about me to just pick me up from the hospital. A cab took me to the center of town where the car rental agency was located. I decided I didn't want to depend on cab drivers or public transportation for the next few days. I needed freedom of movement, control over at least something in my life. Besides, the house was in the suburbs, and it would be too expensive to get there by cab. At the rental office, I was met by a young guy with hair that must have required a tube of gel every morning. He gave me an appraising look, noting both my pallor and my slow, cautious movements. "Do you need an automobile, sir?" There was doubt in his voice. "Are you sure you can drive?" "I'm not drunk or drugged," I answered drier than I intended. "I have a valid license. I just want to rent a car for the week." He shrugged and began to draw up the paperwork. I chose the most affordable option, a small sedan, not knowing how long I'd need the car or how much it would cost. The expenses were not planned, and I mentally recalculated my budget, subtracting the cost of rent from my pension. When all the formalities were settled, the guy handed me the keys and pointed to a silver car in the parking lot. "Can I help you with your luggage, sir?" he asked, looking at my hospital bag. "No, thank you," I replied, trying not to show how humiliating the question sounded. I was an infirm old man in his eyes, someone who needed help carrying a light bag. I walked slowly to the car, each step reminding me of the recent surgery. I opened the door, carefully lowered myself into the driver's seat, and placed the bag next to me. Sitting in the silence of the air-conditioned cabin, I let myself just breathe for the first time all day. I closed my eyes and felt my hands shaking. What was going on with Eugene? Why didn't he show up? Maybe something serious had happened. An accident? Problems at work? Despite our coldness, I couldn't imagine my son just forgetting about my discharge after he'd promised to come himself. I pulled out my phone again and dialed his number. A beep, and then the mechanical voice of the answering machine. Then I dialed their home phone number. Odalia answered. "The Trentons are listening." Her voice sounded as cold as ever. "Odalia, it's Basil. I can't get through to Eugene. He was supposed to pick me up from the hospital today." A pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. "Eugene's in an important meeting," she finally answered. "He can't answer his cell phone. Is it something urgent?" I felt the bitterness rising inside me. An important meeting. More important than picking up my father after his heart surgery? "Aha, I just got out of the hospital," I said. "Eugene promised to come get me." "Oh," another pause. "I'll tell him when he gets back. Have you called a cab yet?" Not a word of sympathy, not an offer of help. I could almost see her looking at her watch, calculating how long this uncomfortable conversation was taking. "Yeah, I figured it out on my own," I replied. "Thanks for your concern." I pressed hang up without waiting for her response. I put the phone on the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel tightly, fighting the sudden urge to punch something. My sister-in-law knew about my discharge, knew Eugene was supposed to come, and still no one showed up. Taking a deep breath, I turned the ignition key. The engine came to life with a quiet rumble. I hadn't driven in almost a year, since the vision problem started, but the skills hadn't gone anywhere. Slowly, I pulled out of the parking lot and into the city traffic. On the way home, I tried to make excuses for my son. Maybe the meeting really was critical. Maybe he had planned to arrive later and forgot to give me a heads up. Maybe his cell phone was just dead. I clung to these thoughts, even though deep down I realized their absurdity. The traffic was heavy, and every time I had to brake hard, I felt discomfort in my chest. By the time I got onto the highway to New Albany, I was beginning to feel nauseous. The feeling was familiar, similar to what I used to feel when I overworked myself in the kitchen on a hot day. I decided to make a stop. As I pulled off to the side of the road, I noticed a sign for Hampton's, a small grocery store where I often stopped for fresh produce for my culinary experiments. It always had the best spices and rare ingredients that I used on special occasions. I decided to stop in for a drink of water, a rest, and perhaps to buy something for dinner. The bell above the store door jingled welcomingly as I entered. The familiar smell of fresh baked goods, spices, and coffee enveloped me like a hug from an old friend. Behind the counter stood Reed Hampton, the store owner, whom we'd known for over 20 years. "Basil!" he exclaimed, smiling broadly. "I haven't seen you in a long time." We were beginning to worry. His genuine joy was a balm after Odelia's coldness. "Hi, Reed," I tried to smile. "I've been a little Unavailable for the last week. Reed frowned, scrutinizing me more closely. You don't look so good, old man. What happened? I hadn't planned on telling him, but the words came out on their own. Heart attack. Surgery. Discharge today. Reed stepped from behind the counter and came over to me, genuine concern on his face. Damn it, Basil. And you're driving yourself? Where's your son? Wasn't he supposed to take care of you? I shrugged, not wanting to discuss Eugene. He's got things to do. I can handle myself. Reed shook his head. Nonsense. Sit over here. He pointed to a chair by the window. I'll make you some tea. Then we'll decide what to do next. I didn't want to argue. I didn't have the energy. I sank down in the chair and gratefully accepted the cup of hot tea Reed brought a minute later. You shouldn't be driving like this, he said, sitting down across from me. I could close the store early and drive you. Or call your son. No, I shook my head. Don't call him. I'll just rest for a while and drive myself. It's only 20 minutes from home. Reed didn't look convinced, but he didn't insist. Instead, he started telling news stories. About his daughter getting into culinary college. About a new shipment of rare cheeses from France. About a farmer who now brought in organic vegetables twice a week. Ordinary, everyday stories, but they had a calming effect. At a neighboring table sat an elderly couple, regular customers I've often met here. They recognized me and waved. The man came over, put his hand on my shoulder. Good to see you, Chief Trenton. Marge and I still remember that dinner at the Silver Vine 5 years ago. Best wedding anniversary of our lives. I smiled as I remembered preparing a special menu for them for their 50th anniversary. It's amazing how food can create such lasting memories, bond people together. Thank you, I said. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We exchanged a few more sentences and the couple returned to their table. Reed looked at me with an understanding smile. See? That's why I always said you were special. You didn't just make food. You were creating memories. His words touched me. In this little store, among people who appreciated my art, I felt significant. Here I was respected for who I was, not judged for who I didn't become. I finished my tea and felt better. My strength was returning, and the dizziness was gone. Let me get you some dinner, Reed suggested. Something light, but nutritious. You need to recover. I didn't refuse. While he packed a bag of food, fresh bread, soup in a container his wife had made, fruit and yogurt, I looked around the store. A small space filled to the ceiling with shelves of merchandise, each one chosen with love and knowledge. The smells, the colors, the textures, everything evoked a desire to cook, to create, to experiment. In another life, maybe I would have opened a store like this after retirement, instead of just sitting at home alone. Here, Reed handed me the bag. And I won't charge you, don't even try. Think of it as a gesture of support from an old friend. I wanted to object, but I could tell from the look in his eyes that it was useless. Instead, I just thanked him and promised to stop by next week. If you need anything, call me, he said goodbye. Anytime. I'm serious, Basil. No one should have to go through this alone. His concern warmed me. I walked out of the store with renewed strength and determination. Eugene may not have come to get me, but that didn't mean I was all alone. I had friends, not many, but real ones. The rest of the way home seemed easier. I drove slowly, obeying all the rules, stopping at every stoplight, letting pedestrians pass. Other cars whizzed by. Everyone was in a hurry. I enjoyed the slow drive, thinking about the day and what was waiting for me at home. Maybe Eugene had stopped by after all. Maybe he's waiting for me, worried, not knowing where I am. That thought made me pick up the pace despite my fatigue. I imagined opening the door and my son rushing toward me with explanations and apologies. How we would sit in the kitchen and I would tell him about the surgery and he would tell me about his important appointment. How we'd have dinner together over something Reed had made. I knew it was a fantasy, that the reality would probably be very different. But hope is a stubborn thing. It blooms even in the most barren soil, breaks through the asphalt of resentment and disappointment. And now on the way home, I allowed myself to hope that things could still work out between us. After all, Eugene is my only son, my blood, a part of me. Could all those years of coldness and alienation not be mended? Will one forgotten encounter define our entire future relationship? I turned onto a familiar street with neat houses and manicured lawns. Maple Street, my home for the past 30 years. I knew every curve here, every pothole in the road, every tree. Here I'd raise my son, here I'd live my best years with Eleanor, here I was preparing to start a new chapter of my life after retirement. I pulled up to house number 42, my house with the white picket fence and the bed of roses that Eleanor had planted 20 years ago and that I had continued to maintain after her death. There were lights on in the windows, so someone was home. Maybe Eugene had arrived after all. My heart beat faster with excitement and hope. I parked in the driveway and slowly got out of the car, careful not to disturb the stitch in my chest. Grabbed a bag of food and my hospital bag. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength for what might be waiting for me inside. Already approaching the porch, I noticed something was wrong. The doorknob looked different, new, shiny, and the keyhole was a different shape. A strange feeling of unease rose up inside me, but I pushed it away. Eugene must have just made the repairs while I was in the hospital. It was odd, though. He'd never taken such initiative before. I pulled my keys out of my pocket and tried to insert them into the lock. The key wouldn't go in. I tried again, more carefully, but the result was the same. My key did not fit the lock of my own house. I stared at the keyhole, unable to believe my eyes. Could it be that I had the wrong house? No, it was definitely my house. The same rose bushes, the same mailbox with the worn name Trenton, the same crack in the third step of the porch. But the lock was foreign. I tried reinserting the key, turning it in different directions, but nothing worked. Confused, I took a step back, peering at the facade. Everything looked the same except for the new doorknob and lock. My heart began to beat more frequently and I felt a slight pain in my chest. Easy, I said to myself. There must be a simple explanation. Maybe the lock broke and Eugene replaced it. Maybe he's inside waiting for me with a new key. I rang the doorbell and waited. Nothing. Rang it again, keeping my finger on the button longer. Silence. I knocked, gently at first, then louder. No answer. Eugene? I called out. Are you home? It's me, Basil. I listened. There were muffled sounds coming from the house, the TV working, some movement. Someone was definitely there. I knocked again, this time with growing concern. Hey, somebody, open the door! The movement of the curtain in the living room caught my attention. I saw the face of Odalia, my sister-in-law, looking at me through the glass. Our gazes met, and instead of relief or welcome, I saw on her face fear, no, more of an unpleasant surprise, as if she'd seen an annoying traveling salesman. Odalia, I waved my hand. What's going on? I can't open the door. She disappeared, and a few seconds later, I heard footsteps approaching the door. Finally, I thought, it's about to clear up, but the door didn't open. Instead, the curtain on the small window next to the door pulled back, and I saw Odalia's face again, pale, with tightly compressed lips. Get out! Her voice, even muffled by the glass, rang with tension. You are not welcome here. I backed away as if she had struck me. What did she mean by that? This is my house. Odalia, what are you talking about? Open the door, I just came from the hospital. We know, she replied. Eugene was there. You no longer have a right to this house. Get out or I'll call the police. I felt like I'd been splashed with ice water. No title to the house? What the hell are you talking about? I paid the down payment on the mortgage 15 years ago. The house was all mine. This is some kind of misunderstanding, I said, trying to speak calmly. Where's Eugene? I need to talk to my son. Odalia disappeared without answering. I stood on my own porch feeling uninvited, feeling the anger and helplessness intertwined inside. What the hell was going on? After a minute, the door finally opened, but only as far as the chain would allow. Through the crack, I saw my son's face, well, groomed, smoothly shaven, with perfect hair, as always, but his eyes were cold, staring at me like a stranger. What are you doing here? Eugene asked in the tone he used with annoying customers. What am I doing here? I repeated, not believing my ears. I live here. This is my home. What's going on, Eugene? Why did they change the locks? He sighed like he was talking to a cranky child. You signed the general power of attorney at the hospital, remember? And the deed of gift. I own the house now. I got dizzy. General power of attorney? The deed of gift? I remembered the papers I'd signed before I was discharged. Not reading, trusting my son. You said they were medical documents. My voice shook with indignation. For decisions about my treatment. Eugene pressed his lips together. You should have read what you were signing. You transferred all your powers and assets to me. The house is now mine, and I've decided it's best for you to live in a nursing home. With your health, it's the most sensible option. I felt the blood rush from my face. A nursing home? Put me in a nursing home like I'm worthless? After all I had done for him? I didn't sign any gift agreement, I gritted my teeth. You tricked me. Eugene shrugged with an indifference that hit me harder than any words could. It's going to be hard to prove. The paperwork is legally impeccable. The signature is notarized. You were of sound mind and good judgment. You're my son, the words came out on their own, full of pain and bewilderment. How could you do such a thing? Business is business, he said coldly. It's nothing personal. It's just that you're too old to manage a property like this. And Odelia and I need this house. The neighborhood's appreciating. We can sell it for a profit. Sell it? My house, where every corner held memories of my life with Eleanor, where I plan to spend the rest of my days. I won't let that happen, I said, feeling the anger give me strength. I will fight. I will prove that you deceived me. With your means? He grinned. Against a lawyer with 20 years of experience? Good luck, Dad. That dad sounded like an insult, like a mockery of everything fatherhood was supposed to mean. Where's my stuff? Thus I asked, realizing that arguing was futile. My pictures, my papers, my clothes. Most of it we've already thrown out, Odelia answered, appearing behind her husband's back. But some is still in the garage. You can pick it up tomorrow. It's too late now. Thrown out? My pictures with Eleanor, her letters, my cookbooks with the notes, my knife collection. Everything that made up my life? You had no right, my voice shook, but not with fear or pain, but with rage. These are my things. It's our home now, and it's our right to decide what we keep and what we throw away. Eugene cut him off. Now get out before we actually call the police. He started to close the door, but I put my foot out to stop him. You can't just throw me out on the street like that. I'm your father. I raised you, gave you everything. And for that, I'm grateful, he replied with fake politeness. But right now, you're just messing up our lives. Get a grip, Dad. It's just business. Business. My son has turned our family into a business. Our lives, our history, into a deal. Your mother would roll over in her grave if she saw what you've become. The words came out before I could think them through. Eugene's face contorted with anger for a moment, the first real emotion I'd seen in the entire conversation. Don't you dare talk about her, he hissed. Didn't you make her live her whole life in the shadow of your great career? Didn't you make her give up her own dreams? His words were like a punch in the face. Eleanor never said anything like that, never complained about our life. She was happy, I knew that. But the seed of doubt sown by my son's words had already begun to germinate. You don't know anything about our marriage, I said quietly. She was happy. She just didn't want to upset you, Eugene countered. She always protected you, even from the truth. Now go away, I don't want to discuss this anymore. He pushed the door open with force and I pulled my foot away, not wanting to escalate. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and I was alone on the porch of the house that was no longer mine. I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had happened. My son had stolen my house, threw away my belongings, wiped out our entire family history with the stroke of a pen, all while I was in the hospital with a cut chest, fighting for my life. How long had he been planning this? Did he wait for the right moment, or did he decide spontaneously when he saw an opportunity? Was my heart attack just a lucky coincidence for him? I walked slowly down the porch, each step difficult, as if I had suddenly aged another 10 years. I got to the car and slumped in the seat, breathing hard. The pain in my chest was back, sharper now, and I knew it wasn't from the surgery. It was from the betrayal that had broken my heart more than any heart attack. Where do I go now? What to do? I had no plan for such an eventuality. No one prepares themselves for your own child throwing you out on the street after heart surgery. I sat in the rental car in front of my former home, feeling like a ghost watching my own life from the outside. Odelia's figure flashed through the window. She drew the curtains with a sudden movement, as if erasing me from the landscape. In another window, I saw Eugene with a cell phone to his ear. Perhaps he really was calling the police. I started the car. I needed to leave, but where to? A hotel? A motel? Anywhere I could spend the night and think about my next steps. I pulled slowly out of the driveway, taking one last look at the house that no longer belonged to me. The white walls, the black shingles, the rose bushes I'd tended so carefully. It was all someone else's now, part of someone else's life. I drove a few blocks in silence, trying to gather my thoughts together. The shock of my son's betrayal was replaced by cold rage. How could he? How could he deceive me like that, take advantage of my vulnerability? I gave him everything: love, care, education, and he repaid me by throwing me out on the street like a piece of junk. The physical pain grew along with the emotional pain. The stitches in my chest tightened, every breath causing discomfort. The doctors warned me to avoid stress, and I had just suffered one of the hardest blows of my life. I turned on the air conditioner, but it didn't help. I felt hot and cold, like I was starting to get a fever. Soon I saw a sign for the Blue Mountain Motel, a small two-story motel with a neon sign and an almost empty parking lot. Not the most attractive place, but I didn't have much choice right now. I parked at the front desk and slowly got out of the car, pressing my hand to my chest as if trying to hold my broken heart in place. The front desk was empty and I had to ring the bell. After a minute, a middle-aged woman with a tired face and dyed red hair appeared. She gave me an assessing look, lingering on my pallor and cautious movements. "What can I do for you?" she asked without much enthusiasm. "I need a room," I answered. "For a few days." "Passport and credit card," she held out her hand. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my card and driver's license. The woman took them, scrutinized them, then punched the information into the computer. "We have a vacant room on the second floor with one bed, $80 a night plus tax." I nodded, not bargaining. The price didn't matter. I didn't have a choice anyway. "Is breakfast included?" I asked, even though I didn't care. "Coffee and donuts in the lobby from 7 to 9, she answered, handing me back my card and ID along with my key card. "Room 206, stairs at the end of the hallway. Check out by 11. I thanked her and headed for the stairs, each step difficult. The second floor felt like Everest. By the time I reached my room, I was panting, and the pain in my chest was unbearable. The room was exactly as I'd expected. Impersonal, with worn carpet, a creaky bed, an old model TV, and an air conditioner that hummed as if it were about to fall apart. But it was my only home now, and I was grateful for at least a roof over my head. I sank down on the edge of the bed, keeping my jacket on, and let myself finally realize the full extent of what had happened. In one day, I'd lost my home, most of my possessions, and worst of all, the last illusions I'd had about my son. The man I had raised, the man I had given everything I could, was capable of such a betrayal. The pain in my chest grew sharper, joined by nausea and dizziness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. The doctor at the hospital had given clear instructions. Avoid stress, take your medications on time, seek help at the first sign of deterioration. But how do you avoid stress when your life is falling apart? I pulled out the bag of medication I'd been given at the hospital. I found the right pills and swallowed them, drinking the tap water in the bathroom. It had a metallic taste, but I didn't care. I went back to the bed and lay down without undressing, only kicking off my shoes. The ceiling above my head had yellow stains from leaks. Cobwebs hung in the corner of the room. Everything around me screamed of temporality, of transition, of places where people don't stay for long. And here I was, at 65, after 40 years of work, after starting a family and a home, lying in a cheap motel, thrown out by my own son. I turned on the TV just for the noise, for the illusion of another person's presence, some talk show where people laughed at other people's problems. I didn't listen in, just let the sound fill the emptiness of the room. The pain didn't subside. On the contrary, it seemed to grow, spreading out, from my chest to my shoulders to my neck. It was getting harder and harder to breathe. I knew the symptoms. The doctors had explained in detail what to look for. But what could I do? Call an ambulance? Go back to the hospital I'd just gotten out of? I felt dizzy and I closed my eyes, trying to fight the nausea. The room seemed to sway like the deck of a ship in a storm. I could feel the cold sweat beating on my forehead, my hands shaking. Not now, I begged my heart. Don't give up now. Not after everything that had happened. Don't let him win so easily. Thinking about Eugene brought another wave of anger, and with it, another wave of pain. I tried to distract myself, to think about something else. About the kitchen at the restaurant, the smell of fresh bread, the texture of perfectly cooked sauce. About Eleanor, her smile, the way she laughed at my culinary experiments. But even those memories were now poisoned, because the photos, the letters, everything that connected me to the past had been thrown away or locked away in the garage of a house that was no longer mine. I had to do something. Fight, not give up. But how? Where to start? I didn't have the money for a good lawyer. I didn't have the energy for a long legal battle. And even if I had won, what would that have done? Would it have brought my son back to me? Would it have restored our family? Number. Some things once broken can never be rebuilt. Trust, respect, love. They shatter like glass, and no matter how much you try to glue the shards together, the scars will always be visible. The pain had receded a little. Apparently, the medication was starting to take effect. I was able to sit up to look around more clearly. On the nightstand by the bed was a tattered phone book and a delivery menu from the local pizza place. So strange. These little details of normalcy contrasted with the chaos that was going on inside of me. I remembered the bag of food Reed had given me. Food was something that always brought me comfort, even in the hardest of times. I stood up, slowly, carefully, and pulled out the container of soup. There was nowhere to heat it up, but even cold, it tasted better than any hospital food. Each spoonful required effort, not physical, but emotional. It was as if each sip was an affirmation. I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm still fighting. I will not let my son destroy me. But how to fight? Eugene was right. I didn't have the means or the knowledge to stand up to him in court. He was a lawyer who specialized in just such cases. He knew all the loopholes, all the tricks. I was just an old man with a broken heart, both literally and figuratively. After I finished eating, I felt a little better physically, but the heartache persisted. I lay back on the bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, even though the room was warm. I felt cold inside, as if all the warmth of life had left me at once. The TV kept muttering, and now there was news on disasters, politics, sports. The world continued to spin, even though my personal universe had collapsed. It was a strange thing to realize. It was just a normal day for everyone else. I closed my eyes, hoping sleep would bring temporary oblivion. But instead of sleep came memories of Eugene the child, of his first steps, of how excited he was when I brought home leftover desserts from the restaurant, about how he changed as a teenager, how a wall of misunderstanding grew between us, about the coldness that only intensified over the years. Maybe I really was a bad father. Maybe I had earned this betrayal through years of neglect, when career was more important than family. No, I told myself firmly. No one deserved this. I may have made mistakes. I may not have always been the perfect parent, but I loved my son. I did everything I could to make sure he had a good life. And if he didn't see that, if to him I was just an asset to be used and discarded, it wasn't my fault. The pain in my chest returned, throbbing now, as if a second heart was beating next to my own. I sat up, breathing heavily. I took another pill, drinking water. I looked at my phone, wondering if I should call an ambulance. But what would I tell them? That my son stole my house and it broke my heart? I lay back down, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe more slowly, like they taught me in the hospital. Inhale, hold, exhale, inhale, hold, exhale. Gradually, the pain began to recede, or maybe I just got so used to it that it became part of me. The background noise of life, the exhaustion, emotional and physical, finally took over, and I fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of the house, but not as I had left it. but empty, humming, with footsteps echoing on the bare floor. I went from room to room looking for something, or someone, but found only emptiness. And then the house began to crumble, the walls falling, the ceiling collapsing, and I ran trying to get out, but every exit led nowhere. I woke up screaming, gasping for breath. The room was flooded with pale morning light filtering through the thin curtains. The TV was still on, now showing a morning show with unnaturally chipper hosts. I lay there disoriented, not immediately remembering where I was or how I'd gotten here. And then reality came like an icy wave, washing away the remnants of sleep. I was in a motel. My son had stolen my house. I'd lost everything in one day. The pain in my chest was dull, constant, but bearable. I sat up slowly, checking my condition. I was dizzy, but not severely. The nausea was gone. I could breathe. I could move. I was alive no matter what. And as long as I was alive, I would fight. I don't know how, I don't know where to start, but I won't let Eugene destroy me. I survived the heart surgery. I will survive this betrayal. I stood up, walked over to the small window, and pulled back the curtain. The morning was clear, sunny, with a cloudless sky. The world didn't know or care about my problems. It just continued to exist, offering a new day, new possibilities. Well, I thought, looking up at the rising sun, if the world offers me a new day, I'll take it, and we'll see who emerges stronger. My son with all his legal tricks, or the old cook with a broken but not giving up heart. I spent 3 days in a motel, barely leaving the room. The physical pain of the surgery took a back seat to the mental agony of betrayal. I lay on my bed, mindlessly changing TV channels, answering one-worded calls from the nurse at the hospital who checked on my condition. I didn't tell her what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to say out loud, "My son stole my house." On the 4th day, I realized I couldn't go on like this any longer. The money was melting away. Motel, food, medicine. My bank card was still working, and my pension was coming into the account, but it was barely enough. Plus, I didn't know how much more I had left at my disposal before Eugene got to that too. I had to act. The first thing I did was call Reed from the grocery store, the only one who showed genuine concern. He arrived the same day, bringing home cooked food and the medicine I'd forgotten to buy. Sitting on the edge of the bed in my hotel room, he listened to the whole story without interrupting, only occasionally shaking his head in bewilderment. "What are you going to do?" he asked when I was done. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need a lawyer, but good lawyers are expensive. And Eugene is a lawyer, a property lawyer. He knows all the loopholes." Reed thought for a moment, tapping his fingers on his knee. "I have an idea," he said finally. "Not about a lawyer, but about a place to live. You can't stay here. It's too expensive and, well, it's not the best place to recover." He told me that there was a small apartment above his store that he used to rent out, but it had been empty for the last 6 months after the previous tenant had moved out. "It's not a palace, of course," he added, "on a 1-bedroom, living room and kitchen, but it's clean and warm. And most importantly, it's close to the store, so I can keep an eye on you." "I can't accept that kind of help." I shook my head. "You've already done more for me than anyone else." "Who said anything about charity?" Reed grinned slyly. "I'm offering a deal. You move into the apartment, and in exchange, you consult me on a new menu for the cafe I'm going to open at the store. Just a couple hours a week. Fair trade, if you ask me." I stared at him, not believing my ears. Are there really people like that left in the world? People who offer help in the form of a bargain so as not to hurt someone else's pride? Are you serious? Absolutely. I really need your expertise. I'm good with food, but I know nothing about cooking. And you're a Michelin-starred chef. That's me being cheap. So I moved into the apartment above Hamptons. Reed helped me move my few belongings from the motel. The apartment was better than I expected. Bright, with high ceilings, old but good furniture, and most importantly, it had a real kitchen, albeit a small one. When I saw it, I felt something click inside, like a switch that brought me back to life. "Do you have the basic spices and olive oil?" I asked Reed. "There's a whole grocery store downstairs," he smiled. "Take what you need, put it on my tab. Just don't overdo it. You're still recovering." That evening, I stood at the stove for the first time in a long time. I cooked a simple pasta with tomato sauce. Nothing complicated, but the process itself, the familiar movements, the smells, it brought me back to life. Every stroke of the knife, every stirring of the sauce was a small act of resistance. I was still Chef Basil Trenton. My essence hadn't disappeared with the house. When Reed came up to check on me to see how I was settling in, I suggested we have dinner together. We sat at a small table by the window, eating pasta and drinking a simple red wine that Reed had brought from the store. "This is delicious," he said, tasting the sauce. "Seriously, the best pasta I've ever had in my life. You call that nothing special?" I shrugged, but I felt warm inside at the praise. Cooking had always been my language, my way of expressing what I couldn't put into words. "How's your heart?" Reed asked, filling our glasses. "Sure, does it hurt?" "Physically, it's better," I answered honestly. "Mentally, I don't know if it'll ever heal." "You know," Reed set his glass down, "my wife says that time doesn't heal all wounds. Some stay with us forever, but we learn to live with them, and they become part of us, part of our history." A wise woman, I thought. We talked some more, and then Reed left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I didn't sleep at night. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about Eugene, about home, about the past. For the first time since my exile, I felt not only pain, but anger. Cold, calculating anger. Not at all like the outburst of rage on the porch. This anger was deeper. It had to do with the realization of injustice. The realization that I didn't deserve to be treated this way. Eugene shouldn't have gotten away with it so easily. He should have felt what it was like to have your life ruined, to have everything you'd built disappear overnight. I woke up the next morning with a clear head and a plan. Not a specific plan of action, but with an understanding of direction. I would fight, but not in court. Eugene was right. I didn't have the money or knowledge for a legal battle. I would fight in my own way, using what I know best. People, their weaknesses, their desires, and food, the universal language that opens any door. The first order of business was to gather information, Eugene's business, his life, his weaknesses. I knew he owned a small law firm specializing in property law, but the details eluded me. We didn't discuss his work during our rare meetings. He didn't think I would understand the legal intricacies, and I didn't want to pretend to be interested. After breakfast, I went down to the store. Reed was behind the counter, arranging fresh fruit. When he saw me, he smiled. "How'd you sleep in your new place?" "Better than the motel," I said. "Reed, I need your help. Do you know anyone who has worked or is working with Eugene's law firm?" Reed thought for a moment. "My wife Doris does the bookkeeping for several small businesses in town. She may have heard something." "What exactly are you interested in?" "Everything," I answered honestly. "His clients, his reputation, his vulnerabilities." Reed looked at me carefully. "Are you planning a war?" I didn't deny it. "He stole my home, threw away my memories like garbage. I want him to understand what it means to lose everything." Instead of judgment, I saw understanding in Reed's eyes. He nodded. "I'll talk to Doris. In the meantime, maybe I should call some of your old colleagues in the restaurant business. New Albany's a small town. Everyone's connected. I'm sure someone's crossed paths with your son or his wife. It was a good idea." Despite years of retirement, I still have connections in the culinary world of the city. Former assistants who now ran their own restaurants, sommeliers, waiters, suppliers, an invisible network of people who knew and respected me. I started calling them carefully, not immediately revealing my intentions. "Just wondering how you're doing. I'm thinking of getting back into consulting. I hear you have a new menu." And then in between, "By the way, my son, Eugene Trenton, he's a lawyer. Have you met him?" Most didn't know anything, but some of the reactions were interesting. Martha, the owner of the Lavender Bistro, where I once helped design the starter menu, was silent for a few seconds when she heard Eugene's name. "He's your son?" There was surprise in her voice. "God, Basil, I didn't know. Is something wrong?" I asked, feeling my heart beat faster. No, she answered quickly. "It's just, he represented my ex-husband in the divorce. He was pretty ruthless." I wasn't surprised. Eugene was always ambitious, driven, but to hear others describe him as ruthless was strange. It was like talking about someone else, not the boy I was teaching to tie his shoelaces. I'm sorry, I said to Martha. I hope it didn't end too badly for you. I survived, she said, bitterness in her voice. But I lost more than I should have. Your son is very good at finding loopholes in contracts. We talked some more, and I realized that Martha could be a useful source of information. She agreed to meet me the next day at her bistro. In the evening, Reed returned with news from his wife. Doris did know about Eugene's firm, a small but thriving firm with a reputation for tough but effective lawyers. He specializes in property disputes, especially those involving divorce and inheritance, Reed told her. Doris says they call him the real estate jackal in town. He smells valuable property and finds ways to get it for his clients, or for himself. For himself? Rumor has it that he sometimes acts not only as a lawyer, but also as an investor, buying up distressed assets at a low price and then reselling them for a profit. Nothing illegal, but ethically questionable. I thought about Reed's words all night. Eugene turned his talent for finding legal loopholes into a business model, used his knowledge to take what belonged to others, and now he's done it to me, his own father. In the morning, I met Martha at her bistro, a cozy place with lavender accents in the interior and the scent of fresh-baked goods. She hugged me, genuinely happy to see me, and led me to a table in the far corner where no one could overhear us. You look gaunt, Basil, she said, scrutinizing me. Is something wrong? I hadn't planned to tell her the whole story, but the words came out. Martha listened without interrupting, only occasionally shaking her head in puzzlement. When I finished, she took my hand. I always knew he was ruthless in business, but to do that to your own father. She was quiet for a moment, then added more softly. You know, after he represented my ex in the divorce, I hired a private investigator. I wanted to find dirt on him, something that might help me in my appeal. The detective didn't find anything illegal, but something interesting about his personal life came up. Martha revealed that Eugene and Odelia's marriage wasn't as serene as they tried to make it seem. Coming from a wealthy family, Odelia had always expected a certain standard of living. Eugene, despite his successful practice, was not always able to provide it. Hence the constant tension, arguments, and rumored even talk of divorce. But most interesting of all, Martha leaned closer, lowering her voice. The detective noticed that your son was seeing a young woman on a regular basis. Not in a romantic sense, but like business meetings, but always after hours and informal. He thought maybe it was a client, but then he found out she worked for a big insurance company called Meridian, the same one that insures half the businesses in New Albany. I listened, not quite understanding how this could help me, but Martha wasn't done yet. I heard recently that Meridian is looking for a new law firm to represent them in the state. That's a huge contract, Basil, and your son is one of the candidates. Now that was interesting. If Eugene was a candidate for a big contract, then he had a vulnerability. Fear of not getting it, and fear makes people careless. Do you know anything about this contract? I asked. When will the decision be made? Martha shook her head. I'm not sure, but I heard that Meridian representatives will be in town next week, probably for final negotiations with the candidates. We talked some more, and Martha promised to find out more. Before she left, she gave me a big hug. Be careful, Basil. Your son is not a man to be messed with. He could be dangerous. I smiled, feeling determined for the first time in a long time. And I wasn't the kind of father worth betraying. Back at the apartment, I began to organize the information I'd received. Eugene and his firm were bidding on a major contract with an insurance company, a contract that would greatly increase his status and income, a contract the loss of which would be a serious blow. I remembered how Eugene had always taken care of his image. Impeccable suits, perfect manners in public, a country club membership he could barely afford. Image was everything to him. And what if that image faltered? If the respectable lawyer suddenly turned out to be the man who threw his own sick father out on the street? A plan began to take shape. I needed more information, the exact date of the meeting, the location, the names of the Meridian representatives, and I needed access, the ability to be in the right place at the right time. The next day I got a call from Martha. I found out something, she said without preamble. Ports, the meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, 18:30 at the Azurite restaurant, a private room for a delegation of 3 people, 2 from Meridian's Chicago headquarters and the local branch manager. Azurite was one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city, expensive, sophisticated, with impeccable service and excellent food. I knew the chef, Thomas Gray. He had once worked for me as a junior chef before opening his own place. A talented but slightly insecure guy, always looking for approval. "Thank you, Martha." I felt my heart beat faster with excitement. This was exactly what I needed. "What are you going to do?" I could hear the worry in her voice. "I'm not sure yet," I lied. In fact, a plan was almost forming in my head, but it would be appropriate. After the call, I immediately dialed Thomas's number. He was surprised and pleased to hear from me. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years since I had fully retired. "Chief Trenton, what a surprise. How's your health?" "I've been better," I answered honestly. "Look, Thomas, I need your help. This is a personal matter, and I can't explain all the details right now. But it's important to me." "Anything, Chief," he answered without hesitation. "You've done so much for me. I'll always owe you one." I told him about Tuesday's meeting without mentioning that Eugene was my son. Just said that this was a man who had seriously hurt me, and now I wanted to get justice. "I need to be there, Thomas. In the hall or the kitchen, anywhere I can influence the course of the meeting." Thomas was silent for a moment, clearly considering my request. "You do realize that this isn't exactly ethical?" "I do," I said, "and I won't insist. But this man has taken everything from me, Thomas. Everything I've built in my life." Another pause and then, "Come by the service entrance at 16 o'clock on Tuesday. Tell them you're the menu consultant. We're just about to have a seasonal specials update, so it won't even be a lie." I thanked him, feeling relieved and growing excited. The plan was taking shape. On Sunday, Martha called with more information. The woman from Meridian, whom Eugene had met informally, was Savannah Pierce, the Deputy Director of Legal Affairs, and she would be at the meeting too. "They're obviously close," Martha said. "I don't know how close, if you know what I mean, but she's definitely on his side on the contract issue." That was an important detail. Eugene had an ally inside the company, someone who could influence a decision in his favor. But it also meant an additional vulnerability. If their personal relationship beyond the professional level became known to management, it could hurt them both. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on Monday when Reed returned with news from Doris. "She's heard from clients that Eugene and Odelia are really on the verge of divorce," he revealed. They're maintaining the appearance of a happy marriage, but in reality they've already consulted divorce lawyers, and Odelia doesn't seem to know about Eugene's meetings with this Savannah. I nodded, mulling over that information. A marriage on the verge of divorce, secret meetings, an important contract that could have changed Eugene's financial situation, and a wife who knows nothing about her husband's possible affair. My plan was almost complete. The details remained, but the foundation was clear. I would use the dinner at the Azurite as a stage to expose Eugene's true nature to the people on whom his future depended. Show them who he really was, a man capable of cheating and throwing his own father out on the street for financial gain. Tuesday morning, I woke up with a clear sense of what needed to be done. For the first time since I had been expelled from my home, I felt like the master of the situation rather than the victim. Eugene had power, money, legal knowledge, but I had something more important, the truth and the determination to bring justice. I knew my plan might seem petty, even cruel, but wasn't Eugene's act just as cruel? He hadn't just taken my home away from me, he'd stripped me of my dignity, my safety, my memories. He betrayed the very core of what a father and son are supposed to be about, and for that he was going to pay. On Tuesday at 16:00, I stood at the service entrance of the Azurite restaurant. Years of retirement and a recent surgery had not gone unnoticed. My legs were buzzing with fatigue, my chest felt uncomfortable, but the determination gave me strength. I was ready. Thomas met me in person, tall, lean, with premature gray on his temples. He gave me a big hug, as if he were meeting an old friend, not a former mentor. "Chief Trenton, it's so good to see you." There was genuine respect in his eyes, mixed with a touch of concern. I knew he was taking a risk letting me into the kitchen on such an important night. Thank you for agreeing to help, Thomas, I said, shaking his hand. I swear I won't cause any trouble for your restaurant. He led me through the busy kitchen, where young chefs bustled around the stoves, chopping, whipping, frying. The familiar atmosphere of intense creativity enveloped me like a cozy old sweater. The smells, the sounds, the movements have been a part of my life for 4 decades. I could feel my shoulders straightening, the wrinkles in my forehead smoothing. Here in the kitchen, I was in my element. The staff thinks you're advising us on the new seasonal menu, Thomas explained quietly. I didn't go into details. The private room was reserved for 1830 in Trenton's name. 4 people. So Eugene was planning a serious business dinner. I nodded, mentally going over my plan. I've prepared a white chef's tunic for you, Thomas added. You can change in my office, in Basil. He lowered his voice to a whisper. I don't know what this man has done to you, but be careful. I've never seen you so determined. I smiled, reassuring him. Don't worry, I'm just restoring justice. In Thomas's office, I put on my chef's tunic, perfectly ironed, starched, and embroidered with the restaurant's logo. It was a little big. I'd lost weight in the last few months, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I felt like a chef again, someone whose art was respected and appreciated. I stepped into the kitchen and immediately got to work. A tip here, a spice adjustment there. The young chefs looked at me with curiosity and respect. Some knew who I was, others just saw me as a senior chef whose opinion was valued by their boss. It was a good feeling to be needed again, to matter. At 17:45, when preparations for the evening shift were in full swing, there was a knock on the back door. I knew who it was. Martha had brought a special guest, as promised. I stepped out into the courtyard, where Martha was standing with a tall, slender woman in her 30s, with short blonde hair and a wary look in her eyes. Basil, this is Savannah Pierce, Martha introduced her. Savannah, this is Basil Trenton. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. Trenton? You're Eugene's father, I finished for her. Yes, thank you for coming. I know it's a strange request. Savannah looked confused. Martha had contacted her that morning, saying she had important information about Eugene Trenton that needed to be discussed in person. Apparently, curiosity overcame caution. Mr. Trenton, I don't understand. Savannah fidgeted nervously with the strap of her expensive purse. Why did you want to see me? Because my son is cheating on both you and his wife, I said bluntly. And I think you should know the truth before we meet tonight. I told her everything. About the hospital, about the papers I'd signed, about Eugene kicking me out of my own house. Savannah listened, her face changing from disbelief to shock, then to anger. I didn't know, she finally said. Eugene had told me that his father had gone abroad for treatment, that you were having heart trouble, and you'd entrusted him to manage the estate while you were away. Now it was my turn to be surprised. So Eugene hadn't just lied to me, he'd created a whole story to explain my absence. It's a lie, I said, like so many other things he'd told you, like his marriage to Odelia. Savannah flinched. What do you mean? They're not getting divorced like he told you. At least Odelia doesn't think so. It was a blind shot, based on the information from Reed, but Savannah's reaction confirmed my hunch. He said they were separated, that everything was finalized, that it was just a formality, she whispered. That he was just waiting for Meridian to sign the contract to finalize the divorce. It's all lies, I repeated. I'd seen them together at my, now their, house less than 2 weeks ago. No separation. Savannah slumped against the crate against the wall, as if her legs wouldn't hold her up. I'm such an idiot, she mumbled. I felt a prick of pity. She was a victim too. Maybe not as much as I was, but Eugene was using her too. You're not stupid, I said softly. He's a persuasive man. Believe me, I know that better than anyone. Savannah looked up at me with flushed eyes. What do you want from me? The truth, I answered. Tonight, at the meeting, I'll be in the kitchen. You know what Eugene did. It's up to you to decide if he deserves a contract with your company. She was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with herself. Finally, she nodded. I'll be there. When Savannah left, Martha turned to me. It's cruel, Basil. I know, I said. But he left me no choice. Martha left, and I went back to the kitchen. The next step was to arrange a chance meeting between Odelia and Savannah. I assigned that part of the plan to Reed. He was to call Eugene's house, introduce himself as the restaurant's receptionist, and inform him that Mr. Trenton was asking his wife to join him at the Azurite by 10 p.m. to celebrate the successful completion of the deal. At 1825, Thomas reported that the guests had begun to arrive. Mr. Trenton and a middle-aged man and woman, very personable. Sounds like important clients. I nodded. They were executives from Meridian. Savannah wasn't there yet. Perhaps she'd decided not to come. Or more likely, she wanted to appear separately from them so as not to arouse suspicion. Okay, I said. I'll cook for them personally. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? After the surgery? I'm fine, I assured him. It's important to me. He didn't argue, but ordered that I be assigned a separate section of the kitchen and an assistant. I began to cook, feeling the familiar rhythm return, my hands automatically performing movements honed by decades of practice. Slicing, frying, whipping the sauce, a dance I knew by heart. At 1840, Savannah arrived. I watched through the kitchen window as she joined the company in the private lounge. Eugene greeted her with a professional smile. No hint of a personal relationship. Smart. He was always discreet. Dinner began. I prepared each dish with the utmost care, putting all my skill into them. It was my element, my way of speaking to the world. And tonight I was going to say something special. With the appetizers, I sent a note for Savannah, disguised as a card describing the dish. Ask him about his dad. Right now. Through the window, I watched as she read it, then looked up, meeting my gaze. A slight nod, she understood. A minute later, while everyone was enjoying the tuna and avocado tartare, I saw her say something, looking at Eugene. His face tensed, his smile becoming strained. He replied something short, clearly trying to change the subject. But Savannah didn't back down. By the time the main course, filet mignon with truffle sauce and seasonal vegetables house arrived, the atmosphere at the table had changed markedly. Eugene looked tense, Savannah looked determined, and the guests from Meridian looked puzzled. I decided it was time to take the stage. I grabbed a tray of desserts, chocolate profiteroles with vanilla cream, my signature recipe, and headed into the auditorium. When I opened the door, Eugene was gesturing vigorously. I assure you my father is perfectly fine and fully supports my decisions. It's just a misunderstanding. Oh, is that so? I said, entering with a tray. That's an interesting interpretation. Eugene froze with his mouth open. His face turned pale. His eyes widened with shock. Dad, what are you doing here? I smiled, arranging the desserts in front of the guests. Working, son. Just because you took away my house doesn't mean I stopped being a chef. There was a heavy silence in the room. The guests looked from me to Eugene and back again, clearly stunned. Excuse me, said the older man, a gray-haired gentleman with shrewd eyes. You said your son took your house? That's right, Mr. I paused. Harrison. Richard Harrison, CEO of Meridian Insurance. Mr. Harrison, I'm Basil Trenton, Eugene's father. 2 weeks ago, I had heart surgery. While I was in the hospital, my son tricked me into signing the deed to my house. When I came back, he threw me out on the street. Eugene jumped to his feet. That's not true. Dad is sick. He has memory problems. He signed those documents himself in his right mind? You said they were medical documents, I interrupted him calmly. You took advantage of my weakness and trust, and now you're denying it to your potential clients? How predictable. The woman next to Harrison, an elegant brunette in a smart suit, turned to Savannah. Did you know about this, Ms. Pierce? Savannah nodded without looking at Eugene. I found out today, and I checked the facts. It's true. Mr. Trenton Sr. was indeed in the hospital from April 5th to 11th. The deed of transfer was dated the 10th. Eugene went black. This is slander. I'm going to sue. Your own father? Harrison asked with undisguised disgust. After you took his house? That's not the kind of value we look for in partners, Mr. Trenton. Selkran, Richard. Eugene tried to change his tone to a more conciliatory one. This is a family misunderstanding. Don't let it affect our business judgment. A family misunderstanding? I repeated, shaking my head. Is that what you call evicting your own father after heart surgery? Harrison stood up, buttoning his jacket. I think we should go. Miss Pierce, are you coming? Savannah nodded, rising as well. Just a minute, Eugene said, grabbing her hand. Savannah, can we talk privately? She released her hand. We have nothing else to talk about, Eugene. Not personally or professionally. Eugene watched them walk away, then turned to me, face contorted with rage. You, he hissed. You planned this. You ruined the deal I'd been working on for months. And you ruined my life, I replied calmly. And you thought you could get away with it? Eugene stepped closer, looming menacingly over me. You're going to regret this, old man. I swear you will. I didn't back down, looking him straight in the eye. Are you threatening me? Right here, in front of witnesses? I nodded toward the waiters, who were frozen against the wall watching the scene. Unwise for a lawyer. He paused, looking around, then exhaled, trying to pull himself together. This isn't over yet. Oh, I know, I smiled. This is just the beginning. Eugene stalked out of the room, slamming the door so loudly that the glasses on the table clinked. I sank slowly into a chair, feeling suddenly weak. The confrontation had exhausted me more than I'd expected, but it had been worth it. Eugene's face when he realized he'd lost his contract with Meridian, it was the first real satisfaction I'd felt since I'd been released from the hospital. Thomas walked in a minute later, looking at me worriedly. Basil, what happened? The customers left before finishing dessert, and your, guest ran out like he was being chased. A little family misunderstanding. I used Eugene's wording with bitter irony. I'm sorry about the scene in your restaurant. Thomas shook his head. Don't apologize. No matter what happens, I'm on your side. Would you like to rest in my office? I nodded, grateful for the concern. In Thomas's office, I drank some water, took my medicine, and checked my phone. A message from Reed. Odalia confirmed she'll be in at 10. Said she was very surprised and happy to be invited. I smiled. The second part of the plan was going according to schedule. By 9:30, I was feeling better and returned to the kitchen where I helped with a few orders, enjoying the familiar routine. At 9:55, Thomas reported that an elegant lady had arrived at the restaurant asking for Mr. Trenton. Escort her to the same private room, I asked, and tell her husband will be joining her shortly. It was a lie, of course. Eugene had no intention of returning, but I knew the man who was going to show up. At 10:05, Thomas peered into the kitchen with a surprised look. Basil, there's the woman who was with that gentleman of yours. She's back and asks if she can use the ladies' room. Savannah, she kept her word. Sure, show her in, I said. And Thomas, direct her to go past the private room. He understood without further explanation. Soon I saw through the window as Savannah, following Thomas's directions, walked past the open door of the hall where Odalia was sitting. Their eyes met, and Savannah froze in place. What happened next was beyond my expectations. Instead of just walking past, Savannah walked resolutely into the hall and sat down across from Odalia. Mrs. Trenton? She asked. I'm Savannah Pierce from Meridian Insurance. Your husband and I are, colleagues. Odalia looked puzzled. Hi, Eugene invited me here for 10. Are you invited too? Savannah grinned bitterly. No, I don't think so. In fact, I doubt Eugene even knows you're here. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I could see Odalia's face change from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. Savannah talked for a long time, occasionally showing something on her phone, perhaps messages from Eugene. Odalia sat very straight, clutching her napkin so tightly that her knuckles turned white. After 20 minutes, Savannah left, and Odalia remained seated, staring into the emptiness in front of her. Then she pulled out her cell phone, dialed a number, and said something briefly, too quietly for me to hear. But it was clear from the look on her face that it wasn't a friendly conversation. My plan worked even better than I expected. Not only had Savannah given Odalia the information about Eugene's affair, but she'd apparently backed it up with evidence, which meant my son was now not only in trouble with the business, but with his family as well. Thomas returned to the kitchen with the news. The lady in the private room had paid and left. She looked, upset. Basil, what's going on? Justice, Thomas, I replied. Just justice. At 11:30, when the restaurant began to empty, I finally took off my chef's tunic. Thomas insisted on calling me a cab. You look exhausted, he said with concern. Let me walk you to your car. On the way home, I reflected on the events of the evening. Eugene had lost an important contract. His relationship with Savannah was obviously over, and, judging by Odelia's reaction, his marriage was falling apart too. Everything he had so carefully built, his professional reputation, his personal connections, his image as a successful lawyer, was crumbling before his eyes. It must have been satisfying. That's what I wanted, isn't it? To make him feel what it was like to lose everything. But instead of triumph, I felt a strange emptiness. Maybe because I knew it wasn't over. Eugene wasn't the type to give up easily. He would fight, find ways to get revenge. And he still had my house, my stuff, my life. Reed was waiting for me at the apartment, despite the late hour. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, glancing anxiously at his watch. At last, he exclaimed when I entered. I was beginning to worry. I sank into a chair, feeling the fatigue settle on my shoulders. Everything had gone according to plan, even better. I told him about the scene at the restaurant, the reaction of the Meridian representatives, Savannah and Odelia's meeting. Reed listened without interrupting, only occasionally shaking his head in amazement. You're a scary man, Basil, he said at last, but his voice sounded more respectful than judgmental. Remind me never to make you angry. I smiled weakly. I'm not proud of what I did, but he left me no choice. So now what? I shrugged my shoulders. Now we wait. Eugene will either break or try to get revenge. I'm ready for both options. Reed was quiet for a moment, then asked cautiously, Are you sure that's what you really want? Ruin his life? That question caught me off guard. What was it that I wanted? To get the house back? Yes. Restore justice? Absolutely. But destroy my son's life completely? Despite his betrayal, despite the pain he'd caused, he was still my son. Flesh of my flesh, the boy I'd once held in my arms, taught to walk, comforted after nightmares. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I do know that I can't just give up and let him destroy me. Reed nodded, understanding. He poured me a cup of tea, adding honey. Just the way I liked it. You need to get some rest. Tomorrow could be a tough day. He was right. I felt like I'd run a marathon. Every muscle ached, my head was dizzy with fatigue. I drank my tea, thanked Reed for his support, and headed for the bedroom. It had been 6 months since the night I'd ruined Eugene's career at the Azurite restaurant. A lot had changed. I stared at my reflection in the polished surface of the new espresso machine. A gray-haired man with wrinkles near his eyes, but with a straight back and a clear gaze. No longer the broken old man from the cheap motel, but the owner of the small but successful Basil's Cafe. The idea to open the cafe came out of the blue. After talking to Odelia that night, things moved quickly. She didn't call me out of sympathy, but out of practical calculation. After hearing about her husband's infidelity and the way he treated me, she decided to take action. I'm filing for divorce, she said then, sitting across from me in the 24-hour diner, the only place open at that late hour. And I want you to testify in court about his document fraud. Odelia's always been a practical woman, cold, calculating, but not stupid. She realized that the false power of attorney Eugene made me sign was the key to everything. If I testified against him, it would not only help her get more in the property division, but it would also call into question his right to my house. In return, she continued, I promise that the house will be returned to you. As soon as the court declares the power of attorney invalid, I agreed. Not because of her promise, I didn't trust her much, but because it was my chance for justice. My chance to get back at least some of what had been taken from me. The trial was short but intense. Eugene hired an expensive lawyer, but even he couldn't refute the facts. The medical records that confirmed my condition after the surgery, the testimony of the nurses at the hospital who remembered Eugene assuring me that the documents were only about my treatment. Eugene's reputation as a lawyer was ruined. The contract with Meridian was lost. News of how he had defrauded his own father spread quickly in the small New Albany community. Customers began to leave, co-workers to avoid. His divorce from Odelia was rumored to have stripped him of half of his remaining assets. But I felt no triumph. Only the quiet, bitter certainty that justice had been served, even at such a cost. The house came back to me as Odelia had promised, but I didn't want to live there. Too many memories, not only of Eugene's betrayal, but of happy days with Eleanor, which were now poisoned. I sold it and used the money to start a new life. Reed offered me a partnership to turn part of his store into a small cafe, a place where I could prepare simple but gourmet meals using fresh produce from his shelves. The idea seemed perfect. Not a full-fledged restaurant with grueling shifts, but a cozy space where I could work at my own pace, do what I loved, and connect with people. We started small, a few tables, a simple breakfast and lunch menu, but the quality of the food spoke for itself. Soon we had regulars, then lines on weekends. The local newspaper wrote a short story calling the cafe a hidden gem of New Albany cooking. On our best days, all the tables were taken, and people still waited to try my signature blueberry syrup pancakes or the French onion soup, a recipe I'd been perfecting for 40 years. Basil, the table for 12 is ready. The voice of Leela, the young waitress we'd hired 3 months ago, brought me back to the present. They ordered your signature quiche and pear salad. I nodded, turning back to the stove. I felt better in my 66 than I had at 50. Work gave me purpose, energy, joy. Every day I woke up with a desire to create, to experiment, to share my art with others. While making quiche, I pondered the strange twists and turns of fate. If Eugene hadn't betrayed me, I would probably still be living in the old house, occasionally cooking for myself and occasional guests. I would still be quietly living out my life, surrounded by memories and regrets. Instead, I found a new life, a new calling. Ironically, it was his betrayal that led me to it. The doorbell jingled, announcing a new visitor. I didn't pay attention, busy preparing my order, until I heard Leela's voice, suddenly tense. "Good afternoon. Table for one?" "I'm looking for the owner," replied a male voice I would recognize from 1,000. "Basil Trenton." I froze, the knife in my hand frozen over the bow. "Eugene, here, in my cafe, for the first time in 6 months." Wiping my hands slowly, I stepped out from behind the counter into the dining room. He stood at the entrance, visibly gaunt, wearing a suit that had once fit perfectly but now seemed too big. His hair had grayed more, and shadows lingered under his eyes. There was no trace of his former self, assurance. Our eyes met. I felt neither anger nor triumph, only a strange emptiness, as if I were looking at a stranger who happened to resemble my son. "Eugene," I said evenly, "to what do I owe this visit?" He shifted from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable under the stares of the visitors. Some of them knew the story. Such things don't stay a secret for long in a small town. "Could we talk in private?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse him, to kick him out the way he'd kicked me out once. But the other part, the part that still remembered him as a child, couldn't be so cruel. 5 minutes, I said finally, in my office. I nodded to Reed, who was watching us anxiously, letting me know everything was okay, and led Eugene into the small room behind the kitchen that served as my office. "Go ahead," I said as the door closed behind us. "I'm listening." Eugene sank into a chair, looking even more exhausted up close. "Yeah," he stammered, then started again. "I came to apologize." I waited for him to continue, but he remained silent, looking at his hands. "Was that it?" I finally asked. "After everything that happened?" He looked up, and I saw something like remorse in his eyes. But there was something else there too, a calculation I'd learned to recognize over the years of our estrangement. "I made a mistake," he said. "A terrible mistake. I shouldn't have cheated you out of your papers. I shouldn't have kicked you out of the house. I was out of my mind under the pressure of circumstances." "Under duress," I repeated. "That's an interesting formulation for willful fraud." Eugene flinched but continued. "I lost everything, Dad. My job, my house, my reputation. Odelia took half the assets in the divorce. Clients are gone. The firm's on the verge of bankruptcy. Yeah, I'm barely making ends meet." He spoke with such genuine desperation that for a moment I almost believed him, almost felt sorry for him. But then I noticed how his eyes quickly assessed my new suit, my watch, my general well-being, and I realized the real reason for his visit. "What do you want, Eugene?" I asked him bluntly. "Money?" He flinched as if I'd hit him, but he didn't deny it. "I need help getting back on my feet. Temporary. A loan, if you like. I hear your cafe's doing well. Maybe I could, invest? Become a partner? That's it. It wasn't remorse that brought him here. It was calculation. When he saw my success, he thought he could get a piece of it. As always, thinking only of himself. I looked at him, this man whom I had once loved unconditionally, whom I had held in my arms in the first moments of his life, whose first steps and words had been moments of pure happiness. When and how had he become like this? Or had he always been like this, and I just refused to see? No, I said calmly. No money, no partnership, no investment. Nothing. Eugene's face contorted with anger, the mask of remorse instantly falling away. You're getting back at me. Enjoying my downfall, are you? No, Eugene, I shook my head. I'm not taking revenge, and I'm not enjoying your problems. I just don't trust you anymore, and I don't want anything to do with you, personal or business. I am your son, he exclaimed indignantly, as if that explained and justified everything. Yes, you are my son, I agreed. And that's the only reason you're sitting here right now instead of being kicked out the door. But being a son doesn't give you a right to my money, my business, or my life. You made your choice when you decided to deceive me. Now live with the consequences. Eugene jumped up, his face red with rage. You'll regret this, he hissed. You think I'm broken? Number. I'll find a way back. And when I do, I'll make sure you'll never be able to get back on your feet again. I looked at him calmly, feeling neither fear nor anger, only endless fatigue. Goodbye, Eugene, I said quietly. I hope you find peace with yourself, but you will do it without me. He left, slamming the door so hard that a photograph fell from the wall, a shot of the cafe opening, of Reed and me, smiling and proud, cutting the red ribbon. Symbolic. I picked up the photo, shaking off the shards of glass. Despite the scene, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the last thread binding me to the past had finally been severed, freeing me for a new life. When I returned to the lounge, Reed was waiting for me at the counter with a concerned look. Is everything all right? He asked. I saw him jump out like he was being chased by demons. Maybe he is, I answered. Demons of his own conscience, if he still had one. I told Reed about the conversation, about Eugene's demand, about his threats. Aren't you afraid he'll try something? Reed asked. He seems unstable. I shrugged. What could he possibly do? My house is sold. All the legal battles are over. The business is legally registered. He's just throwing words around. Reed didn't look convinced, but he didn't insist. Instead, he squeezed my shoulder in a gesture of support. No matter what happens, you're not alone, old man. Remember that. Those words touched me more deeply than he could have imagined. Not alone. After decades of loneliness, after the betrayal of my only family, I found a new family, not by blood, but by choice. Reed and his wife Doris, Thomas from Azurite, Martha from Lavender Bistro, Leela and the other cafe staff, regulars who came not only for the food, but for the conversation, for the warm atmosphere I had created. The day continued on its way. I was back in the kitchen cooking, talking to visitors, laughing at Leela's jokes. By the time we were closing in the evening, I had almost forgotten about Eugene's visit. Almost. Reed had stayed late to help with the closing. We sat at a table by the window, sipping red wine from small glasses, a little tradition at the end of a successful day. You know, Reed said thoughtfully, sometimes I think everything happens for a reason. If it wasn't for what happened, we wouldn't have opened this cafe. You wouldn't have found a new calling. I wouldn't have expanded the business. He was right. The cafe helped not only me, but his store as well, bringing in new customers, building a reputation as the place to find the best produce and the best food in town. There's a lesson to be learned from everything, I agreed, even betrayal. And what lesson did you learn? He asked with genuine interest. I thought about it, looking at the warm lights of the cafe reflected in the windows, at the empty tables that just a few hours ago had been filled with people laughing, talking, enjoying their food. That family isn't just blood, I finally answered. That there are always second chances in life if you're willing to take them, and that there's nothing more healing than creating something with your own hands and sharing it with others. Reed raised his glass. To second chances, he proposed a toast. To second chances, I echoed, feeling my heart warm with wine and friendship. After Reed left, I sat alone in the empty cafe for a while. Thoughts of Eugene wouldn't let me go. Despite his threats, despite the obvious self-interest of his visit, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Not about my decision, it was the right one, but about the fact that we'd come to this point, about the fact that my only son had become a stranger to me, someone to be protected from. What have I done wrong? Where had I lost my way? Maybe if I had worked less during his childhood, spent more time at home, if I had tried to understand his interests instead of imposing my own, if I had been a different father, more attentive, more empathetic. But these questions had no answers, and regrets could not change the past. They could only poison the present, and I no longer wanted to live a poisoned life. I stood up about to leave when I noticed the envelope on the counter. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Someone must have left it while I was talking to Reed. My name was written on the envelope, in Eugene's neat, familiar handwriting. Gingerly, I opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, a page from a children's book, yellowed with age, with a drawing of a bear making pancakes. I remembered the book, Teddy's Cooking Adventures. I had read it to Eugene before bedtime when he was 5 or 6 years old. He loved the story so much that I often made pancakes for breakfast, exactly like Teddy Bear. On the back it said, I kept this, the only thing I didn't throw away. Maybe somewhere deep down inside I always knew I was wrong. I'm sorry I couldn't be a better son. You. I looked at that page, at the child's drawing, at the words written in the hand of a grown man, my son, and felt something clench in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, the wound was too fresh, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward it, a tiny crack in the wall of alienation we'd both spent years building. I folded the page neatly and tucked it into my pocket. I turned off the light, locked the door of the cafe, and stepped out into the quiet New Albany night. Tomorrow was a new day. New recipes, new customers, new conversations. A new life I'd built from the wreckage of the old one. My story with Eugene wasn't over. Too much had been said and done. Too deep were the wounds on both sides. But it had ceased to define me, ceased to be the center of my existence. Now it was just one of the many stories that made up my life. Sad, yes, but not the only one. I walked down the street at night, past closed stores, past houses with burning windows where people were having dinner, talking, living their lives. In one of those houses, maybe Eugene was there, alone, lost, reaping the rewards of his decisions. I hoped he would find his way, his healing, without my help, but maybe not entirely without my care. And in the other house, the small apartment above the store, my new life was waiting for me. Not perfect, with its own problems, complexities, challenges, but my own, chosen consciously, built with my own hands. A life in which I was not just someone's father or a former chef, but a whole person with my own value, my own dignity. I lifted the collar of my coat, shielding myself from the chilly fall wind, and walked faster. There was a new recipe waiting for me at home that I wanted to try out for tomorrow's special menu. Something with seasonal pumpkins and spices, something warm and comforting for cool fall days, something new from old tried and true ingredients, just like my life.